This podcast is a member of WGPRN, WildGamesProductions.com.
Welcome, folks, to yet another episode of Darker Days Podcast, episode number 10. It is I, Vince, here, along with Mark. Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Vince. Double figures. Who'd have thought it, eh?
We finally
Back
did
when
it.
all we had was one small box of zombie fire ants and a lot of empty promises about World of Darkness Online, and now look, here we go. Fantastic.
I can remember those emails back and forth. What should we call the show? What should we call the show?
I went to look for that the other day. Some price choices on there. Some real good ideas.
Well, yeah, we'll have to tell the story how we settled on Darker Days one day. But on to bigger and better things. We have a special guest with us tonight, Mr. Stu Wilson. Stu, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good.
Glad to have you
Welcome
tonight.
aboard, Stu. Great to have you here, yeah.
Great
Good
to be
stuff.
here, guys.
Stu, you want to give us a little background on how you started in gaming so our listeners get a little more familiar with you?
Yeah, I've been gaming for a few too many years than I care to remember, but I actually got my start writing for White Wolf shortly after the whole launch of the new World of Darkness. The first book I did was Lore of the Forsaken, which was one of the first books out for Werewolf, and that was all. It was a bit of a crazy time because writers were being recruited before anything about the new games had really been announced. So it was all a bit hectic, working from pre-production drafts and that, but it was good fun, and I must have done something someone liked because they just kept hiring me.
Well, that's a good
It was a
thing.
good sign, isn't it?
Cool. Well, tonight we got an action-packed show, and Mark, let's start off. Why don't you reach down to that mailbag and tell me what you got this week?
It's empty. Bloody
Nice.
hell, it's empty. No mails. Not one. That's just great, isn't it? Well, I'll tell you, I'm not looking in that bloody spam folder again. That's horrible. Well, actually, they're having quite a few mails, but I can't talk about them. We're in negotiations with another potential guest for an upcoming show, so I've got to keep that hush-hush for a little while yet, but that should be very cool if it comes together. So it's been a quiet week for my refreshing finger. Gets plenty of rest, which is always nice.
All you people better start working out there.
Yeah, exactly. People with lives, I really don't know how they do it.
Even if you
do
have
want
to
to say
send in
hello
something
to our new members. Hello to Kim Possible, the coolest username yet. Excellent. Hello to Chernobyl Peace Prize, which is the funniest username there. And also hello to some guy calling himself Digital Raven. Yeah, hello.
Hello. We don't know who that is.
We don't know who that is.
No. Anyway, let's get on to network news.
I can't believe I did that.
I love it. That intro piece is longer than the news itself. It's really good.
Hey, well, we try here at Darker Days,
Yeah, totally.
So, looks like in the news we still have our network shows you can listen to on WGPRN, now playing with Matt and Olivia Buffington. And that site is mbuffington.podbean.com. He should be having another episode up real shortly. I know he was having some... it wasn't actually having problems. He was waiting on reviewing a certain movie, so... What else we got, Mark?
Also, the other Mark with his show Liquid Weird, and you can find that at liquidweird.net. Extremely cool. He's just busy prepping some reports from DragonCon, as I recall. I think that's what's next up for him, so I'll be looking forward to seeing that when it's out.
Oh, definitely interested in that.
Yeah, cool. And also wanted to mention Matt Buffington, in addition to the Now Playing podcast, Matt's recorded a segment called Lost Lore for the Darker Days show. And this is going to find its home in our very first waddling, our miniature World of Darkness podling. First one soon to be released, along with some other cool content too. So thanks for that, Matt. We haven't forgotten about it, and it'll be hitting the airwaves sometime soon.
Now, Mark, shouldn't we call it like a Darkling or a Dayling?
Yeah. I think we should have another competition, and another box of fire ants goes to the person who comes up with the best possible name for it.
True. But speaking of polls, we did have a poll on our forums, and you users, why do I keep saying users? I'm a stupid computer person I am. Listeners out there.
Beloved listeners, yes.
Have voted and decided for us to stay on our bi-weekly format. So after this show, we'll be back on our bi-weekly format. And Mark is putting the hammer down and making sure we're getting back on the schedule, as I've thrown us way off the schedule now.
I came up with a very complicated, involved way to get us back on, which involves recording shows and then sitting on them for a week. So this one is going to be consigned to the vaults for 7 days, and then will be appearing, shortly thereafter.
Definitely. And
there's a master plan. There's a long-term plan involved here, and come end of October, you guys will see why. But we'll keep that one under wraps for now.
Yes, we got something special coming. No, I'm just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark, I did get something for you. It was in my mail, and I think you'll want to listen to this. Take a listen.
Good evening. This is Beckett, and you're listening to the Darker Days podcast, brought to you by Wild Games Productions Radio Network. A podcast about everything World of Darkness, both old and new. Delve into the secrets and unearth the mysteries, or just see what the shadowy side of gaming might have to offer.
Oh, Beckett, my man. Excellent.
Yeah, I know.
That's
I thought that was
sweet.
great. I had to play that on the show. Oh, just because Beckett didn't get enough call-outs last show, Beckett. There, how you go.
A bucket of Beckett's. There you go.
A bucket of Beckett's. All right, I think that'll wrap up the network news. Do we have any White Wolf news this week? I didn't really see anything new out there.
No, they've all been out partying and getting themselves completely drunk at various cons in the last weeks, if the photos online are anything to be believed. So nothing from them in the offing. So yeah, we'll see what comes of that in the next show. And there was as yet nothing to be revealed about the World of Darkness Online. So we're keeping our eyes peeled for that. It seems that there weren't as many expected announcements as we thought at the PAX convention the other week. So we're still waiting to see what the heavens send our way.
Hopefully we'll hear something soon about that. Let's move on to everybody's favorite segment and Mark's best segment, where he finds the stuff I don't know, but
it's a secret. Yes, secret frequency, ladies and gentlemen. And I actually ran across more things than I could handle this week. So rather than spend the section talking about one particular topic in excruciating detail, I'm going to take 3 short nuggets and just pitch them out at you in rapid-fire format. And we're starting off with the mystery of the Paradox Stones. Now, those of you who tuned into our episode 0 inaugural 10-minute show way back may have heard me mention these when I was talking about the kinds of things that were going to appear on the secret frequency. The Paradox Stones is, as always, a real story. Residents up in northern England, this is about a year or so ago, they were puzzled by the appearance of small carved stone heads that were left lying around town. These things were carved like the archaic green man that you sometimes see on churches and other monuments here in Britain. And they included a little rhyme, which was, "Twinkle, twinkle like a star, does love blaze less from afar?" And the word paradox carved into the stone. It was all high-quality stone and workmanship. These were found dotted around a couple of small towns. And when you examined CCTV footage of the event, you could sometimes see a guy rush up, deposit the stone, and run away again. Now, for fans of Mage, this one is blindingly obvious. Clearly, it's a hapless mage who's been struck down by a particularly humiliating paradox flaw that requires him to sit there in his sanctum and laboriously make these things by hand, probably due to a massive botch with the matosphere, or an attempt to seduce somebody with magic, perhaps. Now, you could use this kind of thing as an inspiration for an odd paradox flaw that affects mages in your game. Often, storytellers are stumped when they're trying to find out, come up with innovative ways to depict the effects of paradox in-game. And people tend to default to the wild, to the crazy, to the supernatural, over the top. But this is a good example of how you can get a similar strange effect just by using real-world oddness, and fits the bill just as well. I used something similar to this in one of my own games. I had a mage called Gideon who spent a lot of time messing around with the time sphere, setting up his own little temporal paradoxes left, right, and center. And a particularly powerful paradox spirit called Wrinkle eventually came for him one day and took him away and set him off to work behind the scenes of the universe with a small needle and thread, stitching up all the holes he'd made in existence. And then eventually, after however many millions of years of this menial task, deposited him back in his own timeline. And this all occurred off camera. When the character came back on scene, his paradox flaw was that any woven material would unravel when he came into touch with it. And as a bonus, I gave him 5 dots in needlework. Yeah, you've got to balance the good with the bad. As it turns out, the paradox stones in the real story were in fact a publicity stunt by a young local artist who was creating them to sell, and his studio was called Paradox Carvings. So the story turned out to be not particularly exciting after all, but for the purpose of the secret frequency, I thought it was an interesting little nugget to pitch your way. Second on our rapid-fire list today is the subject of delayed mail. Now, we've all had our mail arrive a few days late. The postcard that you send doesn't arrive until a week and a half after you get back from vacation. What about 2 weeks late, a month late, a year late, 2 years, 10 years, 150 years late?
Wow.
These things they've all happened. Okay, the 150 years was a message in a bottle as opposed to a real letter, but, you get the picture. So where do these letters go in the interim, and why? Now, the obvious answers for the real world: they fell behind the cupboard in the sorting room and didn't get found again until the place was being fixed up 5 years later. Or you forgot to post it, or it arrived and got lost and sent to the wrong address, and blah, 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 blah. For the world of darkness, of course, we want the less obvious answers. Perhaps the letters fell through cracks into other worlds. Perhaps they got caught in a time loop. Perhaps the letters weren't delayed. Instead, they were sent from the past directly to the present, skipping over the intervening years. Perhaps reality is actually composed of shifting reefs and unstable archipelagos of causality, and what you think was 15 years ago is actually only 2.5 minutes for someone else. Now, how do you use these in-game? Well, let's just pick one of these options. Let's look at the idea of letters being sent from the past straight to the present. You can use this as a fantastic plot hook for all sorts of coolness. The original sender could now be dead or aged or lost in walls of time, and the characters need to find them or act on whatever message the letter contains. And what if the letters were to start arriving from the future, not from the past? What if you received a letter from your future self warning you of some impending disaster? What would you do? I know what I'd do. I'd put return to sender on it and see what happens, but that's just me. I'm contrary like that.
Yeah.
And finally, we're going to take a little trip down to Devon, which is one of the fairer counties here in England, specifically the village of Wolseley and the Farmer's Arms pub. The owner of the Farmer's Arms wanted to expand the bar area in his pub, so he demolished a rear wall, and at about floor level, under what had been a fireplace, they found 2 enormous slate slabs, which took them several days to shift away. They were immensely heavy and broke in half when they were moved. Underneath, they found, perfectly preserved, an artesian well over 20 foot deep, which apparently dated from Saxon times. And then the weird stuff started happening. The gas supplies to the beer pumps down in the cellar kept going on and off. The barman's wife was pushed hard by some invisible force and knocked to the floor. A waitress was hit in the head by wine glasses flying off a shelf, and from the back of the shelf, mind you, from behind several other glasses, not just teetering on the edge. Doors opening and closing of their own in front of the barman's eyes, bells ringing, objects vanishing and then reappearing days later. A clock flew off the wall. Proper, serious, haunted goings-on. The real McCoy. Legend has it the victims of highwaymen, who were always brought to be laid out in the bar of the pub before they were buried, while captured highwaymen themselves were imprisoned in the back room before taken to the local jail. So, haunted wells, haunted pubs, dime a dozen. Now, what I think is the interesting thing here, and the thing that you can use in a game, is the apparent reason behind this haunting. The well was shown to a guy called Steve Jones, who is apparently Britain's first pagan magistrate, although I'm pretty sure he was in the Sex Pistols. Steve asked, when he was told of the story, he asked whether the barman had found one or more large stones covering the head of the well. Well, yes, he was told, and then he merely smiled and said that he wasn't surprised, because such stones were usually placed over wells to keep the spirits in. Now, again, the use in-game here is clear. Hauntings are all well and good, but they're even better if you can tie their manifestations to the actions of the characters, or to those connected to the characters. Maybe the characters are responsible for the removal or breaking of these stones, not being sure what they are, or maybe one of their family members has done it, or a friend or loved one. Maybe the characters are going to be the only ones able to figure out or understand what has happened, or they might be the only ones able to do something about it. They may be forced or asked or quested to remake these binding stones, or find those who can if they're not able to do it themselves. Or if rebinding is impossible, they might have to lay the spirits to rest by some other method. So rather than some random haunting without a strong background, you could use this as the cause and solution of ghostly manifestations in your Hunter game, for example. And after all, a pub is the best place to find strong spirits. Ba-dum.
Nice.
Thank you.
Dear.
I'll be here all week. Please try the veal.
Oh boy, Mark. All right. Does that close things up this week, Mark?
I make that a 3 out of 3 there on the secret frequency. If our listeners would prefer to have these more smaller bite-sized pieces, post up at our forums or drop me an email at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com, or drop us a line on the forums and let us know if you prefer the longer, more expanded overview of one particular subject at a time. We can look at that too, but let us know which particular format hits the buttons for you.
And you can always visit us by going to darkerdays.tk. I was taking a little tip from you, Mark. You know how we were saying we were going to have just pauses and emails and sputters from Skype last time? That's what we were going to do.
Yes, indeed.
So, Stu, you were telling me about something you had for the secret frequency before. You want to give us a little heads up on that again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's... seems like every time I go on holiday, we always end up going somewhere vaguely gothic, you know. We'll go on ghost tours around York, down into... Even if we're just staying here in Edinburgh, we'll go down into the tunnels and the caverns under the city. We go to Paris, we go down into the catacombs, which are used
they're great.
as...
Yeah.
They're just a giant... For people who haven't been, it's a giant underground labyrinth where they've extracted all of the stone used to build the city, and they've just stacked the dead there. So there's just thousands and thousands, probably millions
6 million.
and millions.
There's about 6 million down there, yeah.
Yeah, 6 million bodies broken down into bones and just stacked in piles. The other one, we were over in Prague a couple of years ago, and we took a trip out to see the ossuary at Sedlec, which is most famous for being decorated entirely with the bones of people laid to rest there. In the 13th century, we had the priest went on a pilgrimage and brought back some earth from the mound at Golgotha, making it an incredibly holy place for people to be laid to rest. And so now there's anywhere between 40 and 70,000 people in this tiny, tiny chapel. And the only way they could store all of these bones was to use some of them for decoration. So you've got a chandelier made of bones. You've got a coat of arms on one of the walls made entirely out of bones. I sent Vince a link to some photos of that, and I'll put it up on the forums for you.
Please.
Yeah, great.
Now, how could you use this in a game? I don't know. Why don't you tell us? Go to the forums and post up how you would use this in your game. Sounds like a plan, right, Mark?
Absolutely. I used the Paris catacombs in a Mage game a while way back. I had them looking for a bunch of Sluagh changelings, and of course they wound up coming across them down in the Paris catacombs. To say, there are 6 million dead down there, all stacked up. it's a stupendous number. But when you see these things in the flesh, pardon the pun, it's outrageous. I don't know if it's quite to the same extent as the skull chandeliers, but the columns and pillars and archways are all bedecked with skulls, and there's these little homilies about the power of death over the living inscribed into the walls here and there, and yeah, it was really, really quite fantastic.
Wow. Sounds like. Speaking of games, Mark, have you been playing your game, or are you still on hiatus for now? Mark? Well, ladies and gentlemen, looks like Skype is screwing up yet again.
No.
Oh, there's Mark. Good.
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay. My game is on hiatus until about the 15th of this month. So in a week or two, we'll be back at the gaming table, and should be by the next show. I'll have an after game report as to where we've been there. So yeah, that's something to look forward to for me at least.
Definitely, and my game is going pretty well. We started the Prelude last time. Everyone had a fun time, but I'll describe that a little bit later.
Oh yeah, you had your opening session. Cool. Looking forward to hearing about that.
They had a blast. Well, that'll end our secret frequency for this week. Once again, just go to the site, darkerdays.tk. And Mark, our email? darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. Drop us a line, because my finger is getting lonely. That didn't come across quite the way I wanted it to, but you know what I mean. God, our listeners are going to be all over that one, Mark.
After the felching remark last episode, I think they're fine.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to our classic World of Darkness segment, like Mark likes to call it. Mark, we're going to continue our discussion that you had starting last week about lowering population in a game. Now, Stu, if you were playing in a game, how would you handle lowering population? Would you tone down, say, like if you were playing a mage game, what would your ratio of mages be in your world?
I think really it depends on the city or the place where you're playing and the flavor of the place. But one trick I've found really rather useful to convey the sense of a lowered population, even if you've actually got a much bigger one, is just to focus on the people that the characters are interacting with for this particular story, and then when they move on to the next story, they sort of get knocked by the wayside until the players themselves decide to go back. That way you can scale back the effects of large political organizations in order to present a sort of a game more focused on the smaller immediate needs of the players, while still leaving yourself the option for the bigger political games going forwards.
Right, so you're leaving certain areas kind of undefined, and you're moving into those as you need to.
Yeah, it's very much if in a mage game the Cabal doesn't care for concilium politics, then I don't define the concilium. I define the mages and the other supernatural beings that they're going to be interacting with, and later on, if they want to go to the concilium, then I have a big folder full of notes for people I could populate it with.
Sure. So then you still have the sort of conceit, though, that the concilium sort of exists in the background. So if someone were to say, "Oh, is there a concilium here?" You'd be like, "Yeah, they're over there somewhere."
Yeah, they exist, but until they're actually brought into the story, it's not particularly important whether they exist or not.
It's not on camera.
It's all a bit sort of fuzzy.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, what we want to do here is we talked about a couple of shows ago, as like Vince says, just the general idea of lowering the population of supernaturals within your game. So what I want to get down to now is some actual practical advice. How can we put this into practice and throw some examples out for a Mage the Ascension game? Now, one of the central conflicts in Mage is between the traditions and the technocracy. And for this to work as it's described in the books, you kind of need large numbers of mages and technocrats, up to the amount of several thousand on each side on a global scale with varying levels of power. Now, if you go for a lower population and you actually are stripping the numbers as opposed to obscuring areas of the map, these social groups no longer become viable. There's no point in having a celestial chorus tradition if there's only half a dozen such mages in the UK. So it's much better to use different kinds of mage societies. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can change the kinds of social groupings in Mage while still keeping that central conflict intact. And one of the best sources of inspiration for this is the Hunter the Vigil game for New World of Darkness, which breaks the game styles into small groups, medium-sized groups, and large-scale conspiracies. And that's definitely worth looking at for a way to adapt Mage, the Ascension, to the same kind of feel. Now, just looking at it from the individual level, if you cast your protagonists or your antagonists just as individuals as opposed to members of groups or large-scale conspiracies, you can take a look at these individual mages who have exercised considerable influence on the world around them, yet were just individuals. Maybe they had small cults around them, or cronies, or minions. But at the end of the day, you're talking about just a single guy. And looking at history and fiction, you might look at characters like John Dee, who was a reputed magician in the court of Queen Elizabeth, I recall. Or more recently, good old Aleister Crowley. Now, without wishing to, don't want to get into the old World of Darkness game of trying to find out which supernatural group Aleister Crowley belonged to, because if you read the books, he belonged to about 19 different ones at the same time. But again, you have a lone guy who may or may not have been a mage, but yet nevertheless exercised and exerted a considerable amount of influence on the world around him. Looking at, say, something like the cigarette smoking man from the X-Files, specifically in the latter seasons when the syndicate has kind of fallen apart. He's this one lone guy, but with a lot of contacts in government and special forces and in various networks, who's able to tap huge amounts of influence, more or less on his own. Or if you're familiar with the inaugural Mage the Ascension adventure, Loom of Fate, there's a character in that, a doctor called Ken Himeitsu, who you can take as a single antagonist who controls a genetic research facility. And he need not be in the superior of any large number of mages. Just the fact that you've got a powerful mage on his own, he can exert influence over a fairly large area of your chronicle. You can scale it up, of course, to more small groups. And looking at some sample antagonist groups, as regular listeners will know, I have a complete hard-on for Clive Barker and all his works. So if I'm going to look at, say, his book Imagica, you can take a group out of that called the Tabula Rasa. Now, they're a great riff on the anti-magic using aspect of the technocracy. The Tabula Rasa has this principle methodology of keeping the British Isles safe following various magical disasters in the past. You can tie them down, as they are in the novel, to a single family. So it's less an organization as much a generational thing. Then they need not even be mages. They just need to know about mages and want to stop them. And if they're powerful and wealthy enough, their influence and their money can allow them to employ all manner of servants, from simple bodyguards to spies to paramilitary groups, that kind of thing. Another antagonist group we used in a Mage Chronicle, we called them the Jade Circle, and they were a small group of infernalists, Nefandi, who would reincarnate into new bodies when they died. And this keeps them as recurring antagonists who then become hard to defeat, and allows you to use them frequently without having large numbers of insane evil cultists running about the place. You have a single small group that recurs over the course of a long-running chronicle. There's a small group that featured in, I believe, the New World Order sourcebook called the Northern Security Collective. You might want to take these and cast them as just a group of half a dozen technocrats scattered across the governments of NATO countries. And those 6 people, those 6 mages in positions of power across the northwestern hemisphere, is really all it takes to subvert governments and subvert the process of policy and politics. And then I mentioned Ken Himeitsu and his genetic research programs on Loom of Fate, a small group doing all manner of horrible things. And these various groups, they don't need to be part of huge global conspiracies. They work well enough on their own. Like the New World Order convention book, the various convention books for the other conventions, each featured a sample group like this in a chapter at the end. So take a look at those and make them unique. So rather than being an example of a New World Order power group, the Northern Security Collective is the only one of its kind. And that allows it to occupy a very specific and kind of special place in your chronicle without being diluted and duplicated across the map. Now, as for good guys, never mind the antagonists, we'll steal another idea from Jiving Clive and look at the idea of the Shoal, which comes from his Great and Secret Show book. They're a tiny group of mages that preserve ancient magical secrets, and you can use this as a riff or an analog for the 9 traditions. They draw their members from a number of magical traditions, yet they guard truths that lie behind them all. And this compares well with the Mage the Awakening game, where real-world magical beliefs are actually corruptions of supernal truths. Going back to my own game, we had the Jade Circle as antagonists, and their main foes on the side of the good guys was a group called the Rosedale Fellowship, who established themselves to fight the Jade Circle. They took the approach of capturing these Jade Circle members when they would reincarnate as babies, and then beheading them, and then binding their spirits into these tiny little shrunken baby heads. Yeah, they're the good guys, really.
Yeah, right.
You can expand that further. You could have a local coven of witches if you wanted to incorporate the verbena in your game. You could have for the Akashic Brotherhood, you could represent that by a single ancient forgotten dojo of enlightened Shaolin. Yeah, I know that Shaolin wouldn't have a dojo. Okay, so sue me, they'd have a temple, but there you go. A cabal of hermetic wizards, a sect of heretical Christians. The point is, if you make these the only examples of their kind, just not one amongst hundreds of similar groups all over the world, you preserve the essential conflicts and concepts of the Mage game, but without running into the social problems or the verisimilitude problems that a huge population of mages would give you. And again, looking at the tradition books, especially the revised ones, they all have sample factions within each tradition. So you could use these sample factions as templates for small, isolated groups and preserve the general feel of Mage society without bloating its numbers. So if you flip open your revised tradition books and look at the faction sections there, you'll find lots of good inspiration. Finally, then, we've mentioned the traditions and the technocracy, but what about the Nefandi and the Marauders, the other 2 main groups in the Ascension game world? Well, you can keep them more or less as they are. You can use them as solitary foes with much the same effect. You don't have to change much from the canonical setting. Marauders are rarely organized anyway, and the Nefandi are split into all sorts of strange factions and groups. However, if you actually take the opposite approach and dial up their population a bit, if you allow the Nefandi to become more organized, they become much more terrifying, because then they will outnumber the regular mages, they'll be better organized and far more powerful. Now, for me, I think that's an interesting revision of the old World of Darkness setting, and it makes the Nefandi a much more potent presence. And it's kind of reminiscent of the cult setting, or the version of the World of Darkness that was presented in the Jail of Night series that we looked at way back in episode 3 or 4 or something.
Yeah.
And an alternate source of inspiration beyond the World of Darkness is a game called Unknown Armies, which is just utterly awesome. A lot of people have called it Mage done right. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's definitely Mage done well. So that's one worth looking at. And like I mentioned before, the New World of Darkness hunted the Vigil game with its compacts and conspiracies. Definitely worth looking at.
Wow.
And speaking of Hunter, that brings us nicely onto our New World of Darkness section, Vince.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the New World of Darkness since it came out in 2004, I believe was the date that was debuted at. I've really been enjoying, and I'm just hoping that all these rumors about this new World of Darkness aren't coming true. So now the review I'm gonna look up for us today is Witchfinders. It's a supplement for the Hunters line. Stu, can you tell us what parts of the Witchfinders you had dipped your hands into, and your experience with that book, writing it up?
Witchfinders was a lot of fun. It was the first proper supplement we did for Hunter, and it's the first time we as writers really got a look at just how many compacts and conspiracies and options we could throw in. I got my grubby little hands over about half the compacts and conspiracies from the core book, detailing how they deal with witches, with psychics, and with mages. And then got to flesh out the Knights of St. George conspiracy, which was
you did that.
a great deal of fun.
That's fantastic, yeah.
That was a great deal of fun, because I'm getting a bit sick and tired of seeing every sort of Christian conspiracy as either loony fundamentalists on the extreme far fringe or buried somewhere in the Catholic Church. Let the Church of England have a mad conspiracy for a change.
There we go.
Yeah.
And I wrote up a whole bunch of tactics and endowments in the book as well.
Wow.
So
Cool.
Well, basically, this is the first supplement for the Hunters the Vigil RPG line. This is definitely was a brilliant idea on White Wolf to make these lines available for everybody. And basically, this book is, like I said, the first book. It tackles how the hunters handle a supernatural threat. This one happens to focus on witches. You heard me, witches, not mages. In fact, you don't even need to own the Mage book to use this book, because it has its own magic system completely worked in there. It's like a dummy's guide for magic. That's what I was talking to you earlier.
It's good. It's nice.
I was talking to you earlier in the week about this, Mark, and I was asking you how similar it was to the Mage, because I'm not really familiar with Mage at all. And I was asking...
Right. Well, I just managed to get a copy of the book today, actually, and I was flipping through it before the show. And yeah, the magic section in there is reminiscent conceptually of the one in Mage the Awakening. It has some of the similar structures to it, but it's much less complex and it's much easier for you to pick up and run with. And actually, you could use it if you were wanting to use the main Mage the Awakening game, but found some of the rules in there to be a little bit heavy. You could default back to the one that's in Witchfinders, and you'd get a hell of a lot of use out of it.
Definitely. Everything in the book is very customizable. Various options for magic. Lets you customize your own spells, your own rituals, and it lets you easily throw down a witch in your story, whether it be a hunter game or not. I mean, you can use this for a vampire game, a werewolf game. I mean, whatever. You can throw these witches, sorcerers, hex voodoo people into the game however you want. The book also gives a deep look in how hunters interact with each other and how they stalk these witches and kill them and how they stop them over the centuries. They take the compacts and conspiracies from the core book, which Stu said he had worked on most of those, and wrote a hell of a lot of information about them and how you can incorporate them into your game. Each conspiracy gets new endowments, especially focused on hunting down the witches, as well as a bunch of brand new tactics for you to help stalk down the witch and kill it. We also get 3 new compacts. We get the Keepers of the Source, which basically, to sum it up, they're hippies who believe witches drain power from Mother Earth. Then we got Division 6, who believe that they are a secret government agency protecting reality. And then we have the Promethean Brotherhood, who sacrifice witches in order to steal their power. That could be an interesting game, I would think, if you had your player as part of the Promethean Brotherhood. And we get 1 new conspiracy, the Blasphemous Knights of St. George. And the Knights of St. George receive a fair amount of coverage in this book. I mean, quite a bit, and I know Stu worked a long time on this, as he said, and I'm grateful for all the information he's put in this book. And also,
That's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. Towards the end of the book, it gives you details on running witches effectively in your chronicle, giving you tips how they act in society, how they hide themselves, how hunters can figure out who they are and how they are. And then we also have, back to the magic system. It's basically described as a gutter magic system. Basically allows you to replicate their spells and magical powers. It's not like the Mage system. Think of it as, I don't know, a Magic Light or the Diet Coke of magic, maybe. Witches have something called Source, in which they use to feed their spells that they cast. Some spells cost Source, other spells need nothing to cast. You can just cast them. They're the minor spells as opposed to the major spells. This book details how the witches... I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. I've lost my notes. Basically, they use the Hunter's signature city, Philadelphia, and they describe a different way to add the witches into that setting and how you can use it in your setting. If you're using the official Philadelphia setting, so if you want to add a shaman or a Dutch hexmaster or an African-American hoodoo witch, they're all in the back and you can add them in. There's quite a big section on NPCs and antagonists for your story, so you can just plop down the game, which Mark and I always have praised is always a good thing. Just be able to flip to that book, boom, there's your NPC.
Yeah, plug and play. Got to be plug and play. Absolutely.
Overall, I think this is a great book. It gives you just enough flavor, background, and even rules to run a new twist to your hunter, mortals, vampire, werewolf, maybe even Promethean game. I give it 9.9 out of 10. What do you give it, Mark?
Outstanding. Well, I'm still getting my impressions of it, so I'm not going to stick a hard and fast number onto it yet. I got one question for you, though, Vince. Does it have an index?
No comment.
Very poor.
That's why it's 9.9.
I liked it. It was good. I liked the opening, the whole kind of beginning that was reminiscent of the Hunter Net and the Walking Dead book from the old World of Darkness, and
Yes.
that peppered all the way through. I thought that was great. I liked the overview of magic as seen through real-world cults and events, the sort of history of hunting witches section. That was really nice. The work that's done. So I guess this is in no small part your work, Stu. The hooks for the compacts and conspiracies were great, and the Knights of St. George were fantastic. Like Vince says, pages and pages of details on this conspiracy. Really nice to see that done in such details. The magic system, like I said a few minutes ago, great to use, nice and simple, yet surprisingly flexible. And the section that Vince mentioned on using witches and these sort of gutter sorcerers in your game was, I think, applicable to any of the World of Darkness games, old or new, and would fit particularly well in a Mage Chronicle. Just as fantastic advice on adding witches and magic users into your Chronicle. Good stuff.
Definitely a good pickup. You should go grab it off Amazon or the White Wolf store, or get the PDF through drivethrurpg.com. Stu, is there any chance of maybe a second book along these lines, or any talk of that, or you can't say anything about that?
I don't know anything about another book along these lines. I mean, Witchfinders was kind of the template for the other Hunter books that came later. Slashers, Night Stalkers, and Spirit Slayers all took their cues from Witchfinders. So a lot of the stuff you like, the snippets of fiction detailing the history and the hooks, and of course the new compacts, new conspiracies, and boiled down rules on how to make monsters, that runs throughout the Hunter line. So far I'm only aware of one thing that's not yet been released for Hunter, and that's the big book that cheerful Chuck Wendig's working on, as I believe he mentioned last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good old Chuck Man Cometh, episode number 9.
Mm-hmm.
Download that if you can, folks.
Still out there.
Still out there. Once again, you can visit us at darkerdays.tk, download all the shows. You can hit Mark up with an email. Mark, what's the email again?
darkerdaysradio@gmail.com.
Well, that was a nice pause there.
Yeah,
You're liking those pauses.
You can also follow me on Twitter, alucardD20 at Twitter. And I usually post up some rather boring information, but sometimes I drop some show information in there, as there are some rumors up to some upcoming shows that have fluttered around Twitter that I didn't even know about, that actually Stu had seen, but I won't comment anymore on that. So you're just going to have to follow me to find out. Ha.
I can check that out. Cool. I must have missed those too.
And you could follow Mark if he's not too busy stalking Clive Barker.
Leave me alone, man. It's a healthy obsession. What's wrong with it?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. All right, let's move on to the questions and answer period for Mr. Stu Wilson. Stu, are we ready for the questions?
Oh yeah, bring them on, baby.
That's it. This wraps the show up. That was our questions for this week, folks. Have a good night. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. Actually, the first question that comes out into mind, and Chuck Wendig had said something about it last episode, but one of our listeners named Digital Raven, don't know who that is, some guy in our forums, had asked, who is Steve Wilson, American hero?
Oh man, I knew this one was coming. I wonder how.
I don't know. Blame that Digital Raven guy.
Yeah, Steve Wilson. I'm sorry to say, the story behind Steve Wilson is actually a bit boring. I hate to tell you, I was being interviewed by Ed Healy on RPG Countdown, just giving him a bit of blurb about Armory Reloaded, because it was in the top 10 for something like the 4th or 5th week after its release. And yeah, got a segment recorded, listened to the podcast, and when it went out, I was introduced as Steve Wilson. Naturally, a bunch of people on Twitter and on LiveJournal were also listening along, and immediately decided that I wasn't in fact British, as I may sound. I am in fact American. My real name is Steve Wilson. I am an American hero, and I am undercover in the UK, undermining it for the American people, introducing people to chili cook-offs, cowboys, and astronauts.
Well, just because of
this
that,
thing's just taken on a life of its own since then.
I actually had found something for you for that. This, I guess, would be his theme song.
Priceless.
If you track down that video on YouTube, Steve Wilson has that perm.
I can't believe it. That show is so old and so corny, but it just fits so. All right, let's get on to more serious issues here. Mark, you want to jabbity at those first questions?
Yes. Yeah, questions submitted by our listeners on the forums. First up is Jabbity, who has a couple of questions. Jabbity says, I know I've already contacted you guys on the matter of aspiring game designers with White Wolf, and I wanted to ask Stu what advice he has for such a person. So, Stu, what advice would you have for such a person? Someone hoping to break into game design with White Wolf or someone else?
The first bit of advice I always give to anyone who wants to break into game design, writing their own games and actually getting them published, is you have to treat it like a job. You know, this is something you will be working to deadlines, occasionally punishing deadlines, and if you're not willing to take the whole thing seriously as something you are doing to make money and as a business, then, you know, go away, boil things over in your mind for a while until you're ready to make that commitment. Because, you know, when you're designing games, occasionally, yeah, you have to write things that maybe you're not entirely comfortable with doing because of time pressures or simply because of the subject material, but you've still signed a contract to say that you are going to deliver this work and you can't drop out. You've just got to remember to be professional whenever you're dealing with a game company. I'd also echo a lot of what Eddie said when he was on Your Fine Show about sticking to the writer's guidelines whenever you're coming up with a submission. All the major game companies, all the minor game companies have submission guidelines posted on their website. If they don't, drop them an email, ask what they're looking for. Don't just send submissions sight unseen. Often they'll have a non-disclosure agreement or some sort of legal paperwork that they have to go through. So get in touch with them and ask, but equally, just get in touch. Talk to the people behind the company. Talk to people who write the books you like, who design and develop the books you like. We're people too. You know, just because I happen to write freelance doesn't put me on some pedestal. You know, I just hang out on gamer forums the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
We're all fans. So, you know, talk to the people. Ask what they'd like to see. Ask what matters to them, and with any luck, you'll be able to harvest some really cool ideas. And if you work those in to a pitch, and you make that pitch, and it's a confident pitch, and it's obvious that you really love what you're doing, odds are they're going to read it, and you're going to hear, if not good news, you're going to get some really good feedback that helps you, and you'll be able to build on that feedback and really knock it for six next time. Going along with that, never get disappointed by getting a knockback from someone. Give it a month, give it 2 months, refine your ideas, go to other studios, never stop trying.
Cool, that's a good, strong advice there, Stu. You know, especially with the invention of the modern electronic internet, designers are much more accessible. So you know, you can hit people up and be like, well, you know, here's my idea. What do you think? And like you say, you can bump into them on the forums or via email. So that's a big improvement, I think, just in the last 5 to 10 years in this field.
Oh, massively, yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Jabberdy's second question, it's a more of a storytelling, GMing question for you. He wants to know, what scale of game are you more interested in personally? A small scale game with only a few supernatural characters, if any, within a small setting like a neighborhood, or do you favor more a larger scale game with all sorts of intermingling supernatural beings within a city, for example?
Well, this is harkening back to what we had in the GMing advice section about cutting the number of supernaturals.
Exactly, yeah.
Generally, I like to cut down the number of supernatural critters, but leave the political systems in place. Your advice, for example, on slicing the number of mages right down is fantastic, but in order to still have some of the larger scale traditions versus technocracy, you could, for example, stock a lot of them with the hedge wizards and the psychics presented in Sorcerer Revised, and I did that for a mage. I did that for a mage game. I dissolved the traditions down into just their factions, each one with maybe 10 or 20 mages and a whole bunch of hedge mages and sorcerers. The technocracy remained this gigantic monolith because that's very much part of the whole imagery. But again, a lot of their members barely had any power, barely had any understanding, but they were just cogs in this great machine. So you could still have the big politicking whilst keeping the feel of who the characters are and what the characters can do as being a bit rare and a bit special. So it's important to remember that, the characters are the star. The group of characters are the stars of the game. And
absolutely,
it's not worth getting too large scale, because otherwise you just lose sight of that. So,
yeah,
I'm kind of in the middle.
Why can't Porthos come and fix this for us?
Okay.
Oh, he's too busy flying rocket ships around Jupiter or whatever he was doing.
Okay, cool. Let's go on to some Zorlak's questions. Putting your works aside, Stu, anything that you've done, what is your favorite WoD book, new or old?
Oh, don't make me choose.
Oh, come on.
I like so much of this stuff.
If you had to grab one off the shelf that you'd like to play, other than something that you've worked on, what would you pick?
Oh, I'm gonna dig back a fair bit, and I'm looking over at my complete shelf full of Wraith books, and I've got to say Doomslayers for Wraith.
Doomslayers.
I'm not sure if you guys remember that. It's
Oh yeah.
In Wraith, you have the Labyrinth, which at the heart of which resides Oblivion and the Neverborn.
And David Bowie.
And Doomslayers are those ghosts, either brave or stupid, or probably both, enough to voluntarily enter the Labyrinth to drag out whatever they can find. And at the time of its release, a lot of people, I remember, were very shocked because it was kind of taking the D&D dive into the dungeon aesthetic and applying it to Wraith, which up until that point had been heavy on the psychodrama, not so heavy on the killing people and taking their stuff. And yet, the nature of the Labyrinth and the way it reacts to the psychology of all of the beings in and around it still makes that experience quite uniquely Wraith. And both as a gaming product and as a book, to see just how good all these concepts can be blended together, that's the one I grab if my house were on fire.
It's a great book. Yeah, fantastic book, that one. A lot of love for Wraith.
Yeah, it's a close toss-up between that and the New World of Darkness core, but I can get the New World of Darkness core anywhere these days, but Doomslayer's a bit rarer.
Definitely a rare book to pick up. I bet it cost a pretty penny to pick that up somewhere. Let's see. Zorlak also asks, what is your favorite non-World of Darkness system? If you had to pick one out there, what would you pick as your favorite other system?
Oh man, again, I'm going to say don't make me choose. I'm a lot like Eddie again in that I read and I play a hell of a lot of different types of games. Unknown Armies, as mentioned earlier, is a very powerful contender, but I'm going to go entirely off genre and say a game called Truth and Justice.
Oh.
I'm not sure if you guys have heard about that. It's
No, I don't know that one.
No.
It's a superhero game, but unlike Champions and all of these other ones where you build what the powers can do, you just write down what the power is, give it a rank, and get on with playing the game.
Cool.
The guy who wrote it, Chad Dunterkoffler, is a fantastic guy. He has an obvious degree of love for what he's writing about. Even coming down to the small blurb on the back cover, it is so obvious that he loves comics, he loves superhero stories, and that bleeds through with pretty much every word he writes.
Excellent.
I have no.
Check that one out. What did you say? Truth and Justice, you said?
Yeah.
Truth and Justice, yeah.
Oh, cool.
More information on that is on the publisher's website, which is atomicsockmonkey.com. I'm not being paid for that plug, by the way.
Okay.
You couldn't make it up.
No, definitely not. Actually,
Excellent.
I had found a nice little indie game that really reminded me big time of a White Wolf game. Dread. Have you ever heard of that?
With the
Oh,
Jenga
yeah,
tower,
Dread.
or the other Dread.
What, Mark?
Well, there's one called Dread, First Book of Pandemonium,
That's it.
and there's another one just. Oh right, okay. No, I'm thinking of the other one.
Yeah, I actually had.
No,
Go ahead.
Dread and Spite are, Spite being the second book of Pandemonium, are both great games as well. They sort of, when I was reading them, I was thinking, back in the old World of Darkness, you had a sort of dichotomy between the horror stories and the dark, grisly action stories. And if the new World of Darkness can be said to have veered more towards the horror side, for players who perhaps prefer the dark action stories, buy Dread. It's fantastic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a good read. I mean, I read it and I was like, wow, this guy sounds like he wrote for White Wolf at one point, or has the flavor at least of White Wolf in there, or the World of Darkness setting. So something to look at. I don't remember the website offhand. Sorry about that. Next question from Mr. Zorlak. If you were a sci-fi geek, which side would you jump in on the fight? The Star Trek side or the Star Wars side?
I am a sci-fi geek, but I traditionally don't jump in on either side. But if you're gonna make me choose, I'm gonna go for Star Trek, simply because there's got to be more to life than blowing up a Death Star, only to see another that your dad's gone and built another one
Twice the size.
You know,
yeah.
that's just never getting out of his shadow, really. Yeah, what am I gonna do? What are you gonna do if I blow this one up, Dad? You're gonna build one that's the size of a sun. Yeah.
Yeah, millions of dollar technology, but yet they can't design any handrails for those ramps and everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they couldn't put a vent. They couldn't put a grill over the vent on the first one.
Well, you know.
What's the deal with that? That must be like 20 cents of metal. Could have just prevented that whole thing being blown.
Well, Darth Vader needed a new mask. I don't know.
Have you seen Death Star Repairman?
No, I have not.
No?
It's a Star Wars fan movie. You probably heard of Troops, yeah?
Yes.
The Stormtrooper version of Cops.
Yeah.
Well, this spawned a whole slew of these things, and one of them is you can find it. I'm sure you can find it online. It's called Death Star Repairman. It is hysterical, and it shows the real reason why the Death Star exploded, and it's not Luke Skywalker. Let me tell you that.
I'll have to check that out. Thanks, Mark.
I'll be tracking that down after the show.
Well, if you like Star Wars spoofs, you have to check out Chad Vader, Day Shift Manager. It's supposedly Darth Vader's brother Chad wearing the same outfit because Darth Vader got a new outfit and gave it to him, and he fell down a hill on his bicycle and fell into a thing of lava, and they had to, whatever. But he actually works at a supermarket called Empire Market, and he's like the manager, and there's all these crazy things going on in the supermarket. It's actually fantastic. They were on Good Morning America, and they were supposed to do a whole TV show with it, but I think it actually kind of tanked out on ABC. So it's funny for YouTube. Check it out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, and Zorlax, last question: why do you love role-playing games so much?
I think the main reason is when you write a role-playing game, you're not writing a thing that's finished when you are. If you write a novel, then that's the story told when you finish writing and finish revising. When you write a role-playing game, the story's just begun once you finish, because it doesn't actually become anything until it's played. And for it to be played, you need other people, you need to get other people involved and other people playing, and they throw in their ideas, and what it ends up as is the whole being very much greater than the sum of any parts.
Sounds like sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I love the idea that with role-playing games that once it's out there, the gamers, they take ownership of it completely, and it says here on page 15, they'll rip down like that, next bit, yep, I prefer that, yep, and I don't think there's a gamer in the world who hasn't taken the game they're playing and totally refitted it to suit their group, and I think that's how it should be, absolutely.
Exactly, yeah. Use what you like, ditch what you don't, make it your own. After all, I think that's you bought the books.
Sorry?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think I've said this a couple of times on the show, I think that's the biggest strength of the New World of Darkness over the old. We don't go in for one's better than the other too much on Darker Days, but where I think the New World of Darkness has succeeded is that it has made the toolkit approach explicit. It actually says it. Toolkit, don't like it, don't use it. And with Old World of Darkness, we all used to do that, but the books they didn't very often come out and say it. And I think that's a lesson that the New World of Darkness line has learned very well, in that it's stamped bright and bold. This comes unassembled. Build it yourself, which I thought was a great move.
Cool.
Definitely.
Well, we'll move on to Mr. Boggin Knight, who has won the competition so far for the strangest places to be listening to Darker Days podcast. As we've heard,
yes, he still holds the title.
Still holds the title. Yeah, I hope he got those fire ants, zombie fire ants. Did he? You send those out, Mark?
Yep.
Super. Go on to his first question. Checks in the mail.
Yeah, Boggin Knight has 3 questions, and his first one kind of echoes a little bit what Jabberdy asked just now. He asks, given your involvement with Hunters, what sort of game do you prefer to run for the genre? Do you prefer the homegrown heroes or the more organized approach? I guess, what level of compact or conspiracy or individual do you most feel drawn to, and why?
To be honest, I tend to get pulled to the extremes, because I had a hand in designing and developing and bringing to life 3 of the conspiracies, one in each of the source books except Night Stalkers. So obviously, if I didn't get excited by that sort of globe-trotting, you have powers, how much of a monster does that make you, sort of thing, then I wouldn't have wrote them. But on the other hand, there's an awful lot to be said for a group of just normal people who meet in a pub, in a coffee shop, wherever, trade stories, and go out to try and see if what they've encountered is real, and if it is, if they can do something about it. And I think some of that ethos was really reflected in the Horror Recognition Guide as being just the collected notes of a single cell. So, right. I very much swing to the extremes. I'm actually a bit less enamored of the whole compact side of things, hanging in the middle there, but I think it's just because I've not really run a game where everyone's a member of a compact and we're seeing the benefits of that. I'm sure once I run that, that'll be thrown into stark relief against the other types.
Okay. He also asked, given the relative power levels of the other templates, what is the attraction of playing a hunter? Do you prefer a nihilistic game where survival is its own reward? I guess what Bogger Knight's getting at here a little bit is that hunters maybe come across as a little less powerful than many of the other major templates.
Well, yeah, they do, and they are individually. But that's the key. Both with the enhanced teamwork mechanics of the tactics and with the nature of the hunt itself. One person may fall, one person will fall quite frequently. Again, just flashing back to the horror recognition guide, there's the story of Andy in there who falls pretty hard. I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't read it. But because he falls, someone else takes up the cause. Humans individually can't stand up to the night. Humanity, when it takes up the vigil, that is where the strength lies. So it's all in this tiny moments of just clawing back enough to keep hanging on for one more night. Because if you do that, then when you're finally exhausted, there'll be room for someone else.
Cool.
It's
dogged. Chuck said something similar, I think, the other week.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
I like the comparison between human and humanity. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
And lastly, Bogger Knight wants to know what antagonist holds the most special place in your heart. And he says, given your work on Slasher, he's a little bit afraid of your answer. So, yeah, spill it.
I didn't actually get to write much of the actual Slasher stuff in Slasher. I was much more focused on the Vanguard Serial Crimes Unit, the conspiracy in there. So I'm actually going to turn away from Hunter entirely and look to Geist and the Cabaroi in Geist, who, for those of you who haven't read it, deep down in the underworld, you come to realms that have these laws written as part of the realm. And the Cabaroi are the embodiment of those laws. And if you break one, they will punish you. They are alien, they are scary. Nobody even knows if they were ever human. Unlike Geists, which were just presumably human ghosts who've lost enough of their identity to become archetypes, the Cabaroi could have been there since before humanity. Possibly even since before there was an underworld. Who knows? But they are big, scary, and alien. And there's one in the book which is, in effect, a machine for making smaller copies of itself. And it just puts together these strange hybrids of flesh and clockwork that scuttle around the Dominion and hunt down those who break its laws. And
cool.
It's often, if you take a look at the power level of the Sin Eaters, it can look like they're strong compared to other supernaturals, but when you realize that when they go down into the Dark Dominions, they're going to be breaking the laws, it's pretty much in the nature of a Sin Eater to see a law and say, nope, I'm going to break that one. The Cabaroi will spank them.
Cool. That's a great idea. I love the idea of these, these pre-human entities. I mentioned before a lot of love for Wraith, so I love the echoes that has there of things like the Neverborn and the Onceborn and what have you. Yeah, great stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next set of questions now. This is submitted by one of our newer users, Ravenna. Mark, how would you say that one, you think? Mark? Well, it looks like Skype has done it again. Mark has popped out on us again. Mark?
I have.
Yeah, that's the wonderful world of Skype there. Well, we'll just momentarily... Yeah, we'll wait until Mark gets things all settled and gets back into the game here. First question she asked...
my question's up next as well.
Oh, there's Mark. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. I have no idea what's going on. It might well be my connection this end. So apologies to our listeners. My Skype doth suck. There you go.
Does sucketh, yes.
Yes.
She wants to know...
Ravenna. I would say Ravenna.
Ravenna, yeah. All right, we'll go with Ravenna, who has a very cool-looking picture on Twitter, by the way. If you happen to look at my profile and see her on there, definitely worth looking at. She wants to know, you obviously what new books you're working on, and if you could say anything about the new book you're working on.
I'm in a strange place where I'm not actually working on anything that hasn't been announced. Obviously, just very recently, before the recording of this, there was Night Horror's Wolfsbane came out. The Night Horror's book for Werewolf, packed full of NPCs, antagonists, spirits, and stranger things besides. I think the next couple of things to be coming out are going to be out at about the same time. There's Signs of the Moon for Werewolf, which is the book covering the auspices. I got to do a rather meaty chapter on the Eladoth for that. Anyone who's seen Tribes of the Moon, we're kind of veering a little from that format, but I'm not sure how much I can say before the rabid weasels break through that door. Oh God, they've got the chainsaw.
Boy.
Contemporaneously, I think, but of course, release schedules are subject to change at the whims of fate. So about the same time should be the Book of the Dead, which is, as said, the Book of the Dead. So lots of stuff on ghosts and the underworld, and I know a lot's been made of the fact that it's mostly World of Darkness with a Geist slant, in the same way that, say, Shadows of the UK could be said to be a World of Darkness book with a werewolf slant, but the chapter I worked on has a lot of Geist-specific stuff. You are definitely getting a new manifestation and a new key. And if you've seen the write-ups for manifestations, you will have an idea of just how much stuff that is. I can't give any details on what that might be, but there's plenty of stuff for other supernaturals who can enter the underworld, and for those who can't normally and just get a bit lost.
Excellent. That's one to grab and steal
of course,
from my Mage game, I think.
Oh, yes. And beyond that, we have World of Darkness Mirrors, about which, again, I really don't think I can say too much.
Not a problem. We understand.
No, we got teased very heavily by Chuck with that one, the other show. So looking forward to that one a lot.
I think the best thing I can say is it's not really like anything that's come out for the World of Darkness so far. We've seen sort of echoes of what it might be in other books, but now we're getting the bomb.
Oh, cool.
Looking forward to picking that up. Her last question for you would be, who's the most fun person to work with when writing at White Wolf, and why did you pick that person?
Oh God, I hate this, because
it's even worse than asking what your favourite game is.
I can just tell a whole bunch of people who I've worked with before, and hopefully in the future, are going to be listening in, and if I don't pick them, they're going to stab me. But I think since I can just tell you're going to press me for an answer anyway, I've got to say Chuck. He's just... We get along really well. All the discussions, all of the ideas, we tend to be on the same page before we even start working, and where we're not, it's very clear where we've sort of started splitting off from each other. So, yeah, it's just nice working with someone who is that like-minded.
Cool.
Pretty sweet.
Not that I have any problem working with anyone else at all. I hasten to add, guys, I love you really.
Quick disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everyone's a pleasure to work with, and you just, you're not just saying Chuck's better than everyone else. You're just, pointing out some things that you like. That's all. And that was my politically correct answer for you.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. We're going to go on to our next question, which is submitted by some guy named Darker Days Mark. I don't know who that is. And
no.
He wants to know, was the Unknown Armies a 3-tier system as an inspiration when developing the 3-tier system for Hunter the Vigil?
I'm not sure if it was originally the inspiration for the 3 tiers, because I wasn't in on the early design meetings that led to the Bible, but certainly once we knew we were working on the 3 tiers, several of us who were writing it and who are familiar with Unknown Armies did sort of mention, yeah, this is rather close to the way Unknown Armies handles things. And it was nice knowing that there was a game out there which had sort of, I won't say already done it, because obviously we put our own Hunter-specific and World of Darkness-specific spin on it, but it's nice to know that it wasn't just something shot in the air as a grand experiment that probably wouldn't work, because there's something out there already that had tried it and worked.
And worked, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it struck me, I meant to ask Chuck this last week, but I had this stupid flu and I forgot, so, you know. But it before I'd even heard of Unknown Armies, I was talking to a player in my Mage game, and we were getting ready to play Mage, and he had not played Mage before, and I was talking to him about the different ways to do it. I said, well, you can focus on just individual couple of mages in their neighborhood, or you could have a small cabal that works here on a local area, or you could go worldwide or cosmic goings on. And he's like, oh, right, well, Unknown Armies does that, and then actually calls it, A, B, and C, actually has individual, local, and cosmic. Oh, wow, okay, right. So there's a game that has codified it as opposed to just being something that storytellers cobbled together. So it was really interesting, to see it pop up again in Hunter. It's great.
Yeah, most of the Unknown Armies I've played was actually in the first edition, where those divisions existed, but they weren't called out. And I think that did actually cause some problems, certainly for some of the people I was playing with at the time, trying to wrap their heads around what level we were operating at. So I'm glad they codified it there, and I'm glad we had a chance to do that in Hunter as well.
I would.
I guess Mark is having Skype problems again, because it sounded like he just chewed his microphone. Hopefully he'll be back with us in a moment.
He's having Skype problems, or he's turning into a weird chicken.
Oh, man.
Skype is not loving you tonight, Mark.
It's not, no.
Weird chicken. Okay, thank you, Darker Days Mark, for that question. Submit any questions to Mark at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. I'm sure Mark will appreciate any emails from Darker Days Mark.
Yes, he will.
That would be quite funny. Mark, you want to get on to the last set of big questions here from Mr. Beckett.
You can hear me again now, eh?
Oh, yeah, we can.
Okay. Fucking weird chicken. Jesus. Okay, yeah. My microphone clearly dies, but I can hear you all completely, God damn it, that guy's gone again. What the hell? Okay, Beckett. Beckett had a whole bunch of questions here.
New headset.
Yeah, now his opening one is an interesting one. If you could change any single thing about role-playing games, what would be the things you would consider?
I think one of the things I'd consider really changing is a holdover from, the games of the 70s and 80s, where a lot of the focus in each game is on beating people up, often as a precursor to taking their stuff. So you'll see games where the primary focus is on investigation or on social manipulation, but because they're coming from this grand tradition of games where you beat people up and take their stuff, they still have these really rather detailed combat systems, and that, because there's these detailed systems there, if they work, it's actually more fun for the players to get involved with that system in many cases than to just go freeform. So I would much prefer if every game just lavished in the same attention on its sort of core feature as many games do on combat now. I mean, we're seeing that at present. A lot of sort of indie games are doing this explicitly. I'm not sure if you've seen anything using the Gumshoe system.
Gumshoe, I was just going to mention Gumshoe, yeah.
Yeah, Trail of Cthulhu and so on. Because those games put this laser-like focus on investigation, and I would have loved if they'd actually done that with the first couple of editions of Call of Cthulhu. But,
Yes.
beggars can't
absolutely.
be choosers, and at least things are changing now, which is good.
Indeed. It's nice to have the options now. But yeah, I know what you mean. Secondly, this is a good one. What movie or book or song do you think has had the biggest inspiration for your gaming life, either designing or writing or playing?
This is a tough one, because I can't really point to any one thing. I've got about 6 bookshelves in this flat full of books and movies and music, all of which has had some sort of influence somewhere. But I think one of the biggest culture shifts was actually the culture novels by Ian M. Banks, science fiction series, where and one of the interesting things he does, he has artificial intelligences and seriously powerful, nearly godlike intelligences and aliens and all sorts of sort of modern science fiction tropes, but he writes them all as humans because it's all being processed through the mind of the human, that is, the reader. So there's no point calling out the differences. It's like if you apply that to D&D, there's no point calling out the differences in elf psychology if you haven't already pointed out the similarities, because otherwise people are just going to play to those stereotypes. So instead, you always point out the similarities first, because that helps people get a hook on what they're doing, and then you move on to the differences. There's actually there's a rather interesting in Ascension. Sorry, I know I'm rambling on here.
No, man, ramble away.
Ascension has a cutaway scene where a guy who was part of what amounts to a successful Nazi faction is being made to relive disposing of all of the corpses of his political opponents. And this goes on for a few pages, and it's obviously a form of near torture. But it's not until the very last page where there's just a note about him flexing the spines along the back of his neck, and you think, hang on a minute, that guy's not human. And it's a sudden kicker that though things may look differently, they may even think differently, on some level, they will always be relatable in human terms.
Yeah, excellent. Ian Banks recommended to all of our listeners, either as Ian Banks or with his more impenetrable pseudonym, Ian M. Banks. Beckett wants to know also...
Sorry, go on.
No. Just Beckett wants to know if he should get more shout-outs on a regular basis on the show. I can answer that one for you. The answer is no. You have enough as it is. His next question, he says, I don't mean the question to sound mean. He says, I just can't seem to find a better way to phrase it. He says, I don't actually have the book. I might be off base, but from nearly everyone I've ever heard speak about it, it's awesome. And he's referring to Slasher. Now, you said you didn't work so heavily across the board on that one, but he asks, when working on Slasher, would you say that it was more fun than work for everybody involved? Not so much like everybody played around, but more that it was a really entertaining assignment?
Yes, I would say that.
There you go.
And there's the answer.
The way things were scheduled, we'd just come off doing the Hunter Core and then straight into Witchfinders, and then, woo, Slasher. It's this break from doing a book. Even in the Hunter Core, we tried to call out different kinds of monsters, shout-outs to Promethean and Changeling, but a lot of the antagonists ended up being the big three, the vampires, werewolves, and mages. So it was just nice to have that break in the middle of doing the source books for the big three to tackle something we hadn't done before. And I think everyone on the project just threw themselves at it like people possessed. I know I got my bits of it done in a truly record time, and
cool.
The same can be said for many other people working on it. it was a real breath of fresh air getting to tackle something that was properly fresh for the World of Darkness and hadn't really been seen before. So,
okay.
It was a great deal of fun to do.
Excellent.
My boss did wonder why I was coming in sleep-deprived every day, but the price you pay.
Yes. Nicely onto his next question. Purely as a what if, what untapped resource would you tackle in the World of Darkness that hasn't been done yet? If you had $1 billion and the desire to keep working. For example, he mentions a game based on gremlins, a game based on gargoyles, and he's called it Gargoyle the Rar, and I'm supposed to make a gargoyle noise here. So,
come on, Mark, let's see your best
no.
gargoyle. There we go. Are you happy, Becky?
Yeah. A game, maybe Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Concoction, for example. Is there an area that you think is an untapped vein of awesome that needs tapping?
I don't think we've left many untapped veins of awesome, I must admit. I know lots of people sort of clamour for mad science, but you can do that. It's actually in one of the books for Promethean. There's a lot of resources for taking a look at fringe science and math and what would classically be termed horror movie mad science in the World of Darkness and through a World of Darkness lens. So I don't think we've actually that much that's original left to cover. I think we've covered some stuff briefly, and it would benefit from having a full line devoted to it. And I'm actually just looking over at my bookshelf at my copy of Second Sight and taking the psychics from that. Because, I mean, we have psychics as presented in Second Sight. We have some rules for them in Witchfinders, and there's the special teleinformatics used by the Vanguard unit in Slasher. But I think if we take the sort of Second Sight approach of strange, unnatural powers suddenly awakening outside initially of a character's control, then you can actually run with that in a number of ways that we've maybe not done with the other lines, because at that point, with your powers being out of your control, you're actually losing a small part of your agency and and your role as a protagonist, because there's you, but there's also a part of you that is acting as the antagonist in the story.
Right.
Not to get all, literature wanky on you or anything like that. So, it's a bit like the old Wraith in that part of you is working against parts of you. And I think there's a great deal of potential there, but it'd need to be absolutely awesome to really build on what was done with Second Sight, rather than just being another version of, if you get what I'm saying.
Indeed. Interesting stuff. The next question, do you prefer gaming in a home-like setting, in a gaming store, over the internet, or some other way? I mean, you're actively gaming at the moment, I take it.
I don't actually have a game running at the moment, but I just need to corral a few players. It happens every so often. You start projects and they take up all your time, but I'm sure it'll be a matter of weeks, if that. But when I do game, I vastly prefer to game in a home setting, in someone's home. I'm not sure if that's just because, certainly up here, I'm not sure how it is where you are, Mark, but in the UK, it's always seemed to me that there's much less of a tradition of gaming actually in gaming stores than there is in America.
It's quite rare, I think, here, yeah.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a local gaming store here that has a Wednesday night game, for example, but that's it,
Yeah. A lot of that is because the gaming stores are in city centres, whereas a lot of people live out in the suburbs, and thus getting in to go to a game is a bit rarer. Whereas if you go to someone's house, then obviously you're not about to destroy any stock if you get pizza in, or if the host or indeed one of the players shows up and fancies cooking a meal, even better. I
Indeed.
When I was at university, I had a very successful Mage game with a guy who went on, or at least who would have went on to be a professional chef. And so we were always well fed and rather happy when that started going.
Tasty, yes. Cool. Nice. Stepping away now a little bit from White Wolf, do you play at all any D&D? Do you have a favorite edition there?
I played, I think it was about 5 sessions of a 3rd edition game, and face to face it really didn't grab me. I'm not sure if it was the rules or the group, but I didn't really get into it more. But the computer game Neverwinter Nights actually sold me on a really good implementation of the 3rd edition rules.
Right, yes, it is. Yeah.
They certainly seem to work better for me with the computer running them rather than a human being. On the other hand, I've only managed one quick playtest of 4th edition, and I want to get it going more. It certainly seems like it gets the players more involved, because you have things like, you've got the miniatures, you've got the battle mats, the character sheets, power cards, a lot of stuff where you've got tactile elements, things for players to hold and fiddle with. When they're not taking an action, they can be judging what they're going to do next. And that, in some ways, is actually a throwback to Deadlands, which, at the time, maybe it wasn't the flashiest or most streamlined of systems, but it used all different shapes of dice. It used poker cards, poker chips, all that sort of thing. So there was always something on the table for people to be fiddling with and deciding, and it was very tactile, and it got people immersed in a game in a way which systems that just use dice, pen, and pencil sometimes don't. So,
definitely. Yeah, I think any game can benefit. No, sorry. Any game can benefit from props like that. I know, for example, in World of Darkness games, if the characters find something like a tome or an artifact or an item, I like to give out a little item card with a picture in the description and that kind of thing. So, certainly games that have, I suppose you'd call it, high production values, they can really get the players involved, because it's fun and it's nice and it's shiny. So there you go.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I've been toying with, I've not actually done this yet, is for a World of Darkness game, printing out a sheet with various boxes, for like your health and power stat, and using glass beads to track them. So rather than just ticking off check boxes, you're actively sliding the beads over. You can glance down, see roughly how much you have remaining.
That's a hell of a
That's fun.
It's a bit more involved than just ticking off a box on a form.
I had actually made up a sheet. I made up a sheet for my game involved with boxes, but I didn't even think about the beads. That's an awesome idea, actually.
That's quite good fun. I just want to steal someone else's beads, though. I'd just be too
Oh yeah,
get off my beads to get your own beads.
I have a real problem. I can't go to without getting beads. Go to IKEA, must have beads. Like some zombie collecting influence. Only it's not brains, it's beads. I don't know if I'm just a dyslexic zombie.
This is a really unsuccessful zombie. But you look good at the end of the day, so,
Yeah, that's the important thing.
Yes. Also, Beckett's asking, does White Wolf have a close or existing relationship with other gaming companies like Wizards of the Coast or Paizo or other quote-unquote competing companies? He says he's heard that Paizo and Wizards of the Coast are good friends, despite the supposed Pathfinder D&D spat, which I don't really believe ever actually happened. And he was just wondering if White Wolf had similar relationships with other companies. Maybe he mentions the new or old developers of Shadowrun or something like that.
Unfortunately, I'm really not in a position to answer that. As a writer, you're just a freelancer who contracts out to White Wolf on a game-by-game basis. And while you get to know some of the developers as friends, you don't really get to know anyone sort of outside that circle. So I'm afraid I cannot answer that one. Someone like Ethan or maybe Eddie would be a better person to ask, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're based up in Edinburgh full time. You've not been stationed out in the States working for White Wolf over there, and then come back, or are you? In other words, your work is occurring entirely, as it were, virtually over the net.
Yeah. All contact I have with people from White Wolf has been over email or the occasional phone call to resolve a problem. I've never been to, well, I've been to America, but only on holiday. No, only on vacation, I should say. I've never been to the White Wolf offices. The only other guys I know who freelance, Woodingham and Aaron Dembski-Bowden, I've met both of them, but that's because they're British, and I happen to be in the same place as them for a con or just for a night out.
Right.
Cool.
I think that's really cool. I think it's fantastic that you can produce all this, work and product for a company, and yet you never go there.
So you've never met the people from White Wolf that actually own White Wolf? Well, the original White Wolf, I should say.
Yeah, I've never met any of them, which is actually why listening to the Darker Days podcast here has been a bit interesting, because it's hearing people like Chuck and Eddie, hearing their voices for the very first time.
Oh, wow.
And I always have this moment of culture shock. Holy shit, Chuck's American.
Excellent. Okay, here's a good one for you. Aliens tell you that the world is going to be destroyed in 2 days. You have one nuclear weapon. Which country gets it, and why?
Wow. What a question, Beckett. Thanks.
Really?
I'm gonna actually be a bit of a killjoy on this one, because for a project, and I'm not saying which one. It might be one I've mentioned. It might be one I've not. I've actually done a bit of research on the efficiency and the effectiveness of nuclear weapons, and unless it was particularly big, one nuke ain't gonna do much more than destroy maybe half of New York City.
Oh, darn.
And when you look at the impacts that way, it's not particularly useful as a suicide weapon. If aliens have come all this way, they're not going to be deterred by a nuke. So
what if they were really small aliens?
I'm guessing it's just you do it out of spite.
True. Yeah, hell with it. Why not loose off a nuke? In which case, I'd give it to New Zealand, because they've never had one and they don't want one. And as the saying goes with assault rifles, the only person that's safe to have one is someone who doesn't want one. So hell with it.
Yes.
Give the nuke to New Zealand. See what they do with it. It'll be entertaining if nothing else.
Exactly. Cool. He's got a couple more questions. He wants to know when are we getting a gangrel fighting style for claws? Do you have any input in that?
I've not ever actually worked for never actually worked on any of the vampire books, so I couldn't say for certain, but I'm sure if there isn't one in the pipeline officially, there's guidelines for coming up with fighting styles. I believe there's a whole bunch in Armory Reloaded, so that could certainly be one place to start looking, and if not there, then another book that's coming out that, again, I might have mentioned, I might have not, would contain the tools for making one. So,
cool.
Can't guarantee there'd be an official one, but there's definitely guidelines for putting your own together.
Right. Okay. And we're going to go with one more question from Beckett before I want to hand over to Vince, because I'm sure he's going to wrap up with one or two. He asks, would you prefer to be the last survivor in a fast zombie movie like Dawn of the Dead, the remake, a slow zombie movie like Night of the Living Dead, or some kind of weird vampire apocalypse movie like I Am Legend?
Probably the fast zombie apocalypse, sort of Dawn of the Dead or 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
You get an awful lot more exercise that way.
Yeah.
And
cool.
There's something about the fast zombies that don't have the same sense of crushing inevitability that the slow ones do. a slow zombie apocalypse is very much the slow march that eventually takes over the world. The fast zombies always tend to be a bit frenzied. They'll go after something if they see it, but then they'll lose interest. So you stand more chance of hiding from the fast zombies.
That's probably true, actually, yeah. Okay, cool. So thanks for those answers, and thank you, Beckett, for your exhaustive list of questions, and apologies for the one or two that didn't make the cut. Vince, any more from you?
Basically, I think we're going to do our usual question. I'm sure you've heard it many times since you've listened to us.
You have to ask it, yes.
If you could be a household appliance, which household appliance would you be, and why?
Coffee maker. The good old-fashioned drip coffee maker. You load it up with grounds, you put some water in, you come back 10 minutes later, and you have something fantastic that most people cannot live without. If I wish I could say that the same were true for my books, but, some people might think that. Most probably won't. But, hey, I can dream.
All right.
At least I'm not saying I'm going to be an iPhone.
Yeah. I was like, household appliance. He's like, iPhone. I'm like, oh, okay. That works, I guess. I guess that's a household appliance.
Yeah, there's not that I have anything against people with iPhones. I just always have to take a second look when I see one, just to make sure they're not molesting a hamster. Just that look as they're stroking the screen. There's something wrong with some of them. They don't have phones in their hands.
No, I don't have an iPhone. I only got suckered into the storm.
Is it not a big thing in the States? Over here in Britain, I mean, I moved back to England 5 years ago, and I discovered in my absence that people had just become texting mad, mobile phone, cell phone mad. I guess, I don't know, is that a huge thing over there in the States, Vince?
Well, texting? Oh, yeah, of course, everybody does it, but the iPhone is only limited to AT&T here, so...
Oh, okay, right.
And AT&T, well, sucks.
Right, okay.
Okay, that's going to wrap up the questions. Stu, thank you for joining us this week on Darker Days, episode number 10.
No problem, thank you for having me.
And if anyone wanted to get in contact with you, do you have a public email or a public website, maybe a plug you want to give? Or?
I have a whole lot. I have a website at zeropointinformation.com, which is a rather long site name, but zeropointinformation.com. I can also be found on LiveJournal, on Twitter, on the RPGNet forums, on the White Wolf forums, and probably any other place you notice the name, maybe even including the Darker Days forums, as a Digital Raven.
That's you?
Good
timing, Mark.
No!
It's like I've just taken the mask off, and it's the end of Scooby-Doo. I've gotten away with it. One of you darn kids asking me to plug myself. Anyone who's wanting to drop me an email can also find me on digitalraven@gmail.com. I'm sure that email address came as a shock to everyone.
It's very original and easy to remember. All right, folks.
Good stuff.
We're going to wrap things up for this week. This has been the Darker Days podcast, episode number 10. Steve Wilson, American Hero. Thanks for joining us. This is Vince signing off from Mark and Stu. Have a wonderful evening. Don't forget to listen to us, Darker Days Podcast, the unofficial, official Will of Darkness podcast. darkerdaysradio @gmail.com and darkerdays.tk. Good night. Still there, Mark?
No, my Skype has collapsed again, and I'm gone once more.
Well,
Jesus, the show where Skype slew me 3 times, twice, 3. Jesus Christ!
Where chicken? Mark, that's going to be your new name now. Is in Darker Days, Mark the Were Chicken.
The Were Chicken, the feared tribe of the Pukaki.
Oh boy!
Oh god! To anyone who doesn't know what he's talking about, do not Google that. Whatever you do, do not Google that term. Or, ignore me.
Yeah.
Well, I remember they had a wrestler called the Bukkake Kid for the longest time. No one seemed to get it, though.
Oh, dear.
So, Mark, you were saying back in the show you're going to be starting up your campaign again another week or so?
Yeah. During my hiatus, one of the other players started up a D&D Pathfinder campaign, and he's going to be shifting that off to a Friday, and they're wrapping their Tuesday session on the 15th, and after that, Tuesday is on mine once more. So we'll be picking up mid-plot where we left the characters and delving them deep into the depths of the Umbra, and yeah, kicking ass and having fun and stealing ideas from Clive Barker. That's Mage.
We can always get a were-chicken into your game now.
I can now, yes, and I have just cause for it too.
That's correct. Did you?
So how did your Prelude session go?
Oh,
sorry,
wow.
what?
It was really good. Actually, like I was saying last episode, I'm basing my whole story off of Supernatural, the TV show. I know you haven't really taken a look at it, but you watched that at all, Stu?
I caught a few episodes. Yeah, it's, let's just call it research for Hunter.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great show.
Yeah, it's a great toolbox for Hunter, and I had my characters. I made like the whole compact. I made my own compact called the Roadhouse for it. I made up the cult that they use on the show, based off the gun that's in the Armored Reloaded, just with a few tweaks. I had the players start. I gathered them up actually at a strip club, of all places to start them at, and I had I had a vampire break the masquerade pretty much, and they had to follow it and hunt it down, and they found this old-time hunter who was pretty much teaching them the ropes, and then one of the players found out that his family had been a long line of hunters, and they were keeping it a secret from him, and the vampires actually had wound up finding the house and killing off his family, and he had to deal with that, and he had to deal with learning how his family was a hunter. He found like a safe in his house. He found like a panic room. He had like
cool.
There was like a workshop. All these different little things. He found journals, and he found like an old blacksmithing forge when they were making silver bullets. So he's just finding out.
Cool idea.
Yeah, he's just finding out that his folks were hunting werewolves as well as vampires. I got little hints of witches from the Witchfinder's Guide, because I've been using that heavily because it's been a hell of a lot of fun. And my stupid phone is ringing in the background, as you probably can hear.
I wondered what that sound was.
Yes, it's...
Hey,
yeah,
Vince, speaking of strip clubs, who's that in your SIG now?
Oh, that's Candice Michelle from the WWE. You like that one, huh?
Well, she's got a lot going for her.
She has a lot of, let's just call them talents.
She has a lot of assets, right? The power of my signature. So, Mark, did you like that nice email that I sent you and that wacky dream that I had?
The Ronald McDonald meets Freddy Krueger thing?
No. The one with the movie theater?
Oh, the other one where I'm a disembodied voice in the movie theater. That was good.
Yeah, apparently since we were doing so many podcasts and I was focusing so hardcore on the show and getting things out and everything, that I actually had a dream that I was in a movie theater, and like all the movie theaters were named, like one was vampire, another one was werewolf, another one was mage, and all the doors were locked except apparently for the hunter one, which was open, and that theater was full, so I couldn't find a seat. So I come outside, I'm wandering around, then I hear over the loudspeaker, the following movies will be starting at the time, and I'm listening, and I'm like, wait, I know that voice, that's Mark. And I'm like, what the hell's Mark doing here? So, and then I had woken up because my alarm woke me up, but I had to tell Mark about that because I thought he'd have a riot laugh out of that one. So
that's funny. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, like I said, from time to time, I do moonlight as a theater announcer in the astral realms, so it pays good,
Yeah, well, whatever you have to do to pass the time.
Though you're saying about the Hunter Theater, I dread to think what sort of snacks they sell in the lobby.
I just see all these people. I walk inside and I just see all these people sitting there with like these thick glasses on, like the 3D glasses, and I'm like, oh shit, there's no seats. So I just walked out.
Yeah, I mean there must have been what 24 people in there, one for each compact and conspiracy. I mean, the other theatres, they only had like 10 people in there. Plenty of room.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, back to... yeah. My campaign, I am putting all my notes up on our website. Once I get that all hacked out, I'll give you guys the address. But once again, you can get us darkerdays.tk, and wildgamesproductions.com is the radio network. If you want to join up your show and you're listening, you have an idea, hit us up, hit Mark up at Mark, what's our address?
darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. How many times do I have to say it? My God.
I just like hearing you
This
say
time
it.
you said it without the pause.
Yeah, I know, Mark. What's
I
up?
did. Ask me the show and I'll do a pause that lasts for 2 weeks.
Go ahead. Do the pause. All right. I think, I got a nice... My wife just made a nice... early today, she made a nice big pot of chili in the crock pot, so...
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
So, yeah,
tasty.
it's been going since, I don't know, sometime this morning, and now it's like, geez, I don't know, 9 o'clock here. So I'll be...
It's calling you. It's 2 a.m. here now, man. Jesus.
So
Yeah.
I'll be jumping into that chili, and speaking of which, I remember Chuck said he wanted to be a crock pot, so...
That's right. That's his
Chuck
his
making
household
chili.
plan.
Yeah. All right, everybody, let's get the hell out of here. Good night, folks.
All right, cheers, guys.